Bringing you the top stories from Bonners Ferry to St. Mary's and everywhere in between, this is the North Idaho Prepcast with Ryan Scaggs.
That's right. It's another edition of the North Idaho Prepcast here on IdahoSports.com, talking everything District 1. I'm Brandon Baney, and now here's the guy who always washes his hands with Dawn dish soap, Ryan Scaggs. What's going on, Ryan?
Not always. Only when I cut jalapenos, unlike you. So, yeah, no, it's going well. It's Wednesday, and we recovered from week one. So we're here and ready for another week of sports here in North Idaho.
Yeah, and in terms of overall athletic programs, I don't know that anybody. I know for a fact nobody had a better week than Lake City High from Coeur d'Alene. They just dominated every sport across the board.
Yeah, no, a great week for the Timberwolves. Obviously, they even won cross country. So, soccer teams swept the District 5 and 6 teams from Southern Idaho. Boys and girls looked awesome. You had a football team beat Lakeland. Then the volleyball team won the Judy Fong volleyball tournament down in Lewiston. So, hats off to the T-Wolves. They had an awesome week this last week. So, can give a shout out to them. That obviously there's no easy weeks here, but definitely shown and outshone anybody. I think statewide too. They probably had the best week of anyone.
Yeah, the Lake City boys soccer team I think is real. They're legit. They're looking really strong. The volleyball program we talked about won the Judy Fong tournament. Lakeland didn't even advance into the bracket portion, the winner's bracket. They had to settle for the consolation side of the bracket, which was kind of surprising at the Judy Fong tournament. And then, let's talk about that football game because they also matched up with Lakeland there. And for the Hawks, an 0-2 start, not ideal. And for Lake City, we talked about the big question was going to be who was going to play quarterback. And it turns out it was Josiah Weaver, and he did pretty well.
Yeah, he had a manageable game, and really in the second half was able to start putting things together and had a touchdown late to Zach Johnson. So, they putting things together. The T-Wolves finally kind of found their groove. And we wondered about that going into the game. How was it going to be a tale of two halves? Who was going to show up? I believe it was 3-0 at halftime. Lakeland had the lead. And then the T-Wolves got the two touchdowns in the second half to close things out. But the one thing that stood out, I was talking to my buddy Craig Shaver, who was in the booth with me on Friday night, but he was able to watch the film on that game and said the physicality is what separated the game in the second half, that Lake City got more physical and was really able to impose their will. And that was what kind of sealed the deal for them. So hats off to them and getting their first victory and going 1-0 to start the year. So that's a big deal for them.
Yeah, and for Lakeland now, this is through 2 games, 9 total points. That is, it's surprising to me because they've got so many capable playmakers.
Yeah, and the thing about it though is I wouldn't push the panic button yet if I was them, because you look at how many points they've given up. Their defense is keeping them in the game. So if they can figure out things on offense, they're going to be there. Their defense is holding some decent athletes pretty steady. So I wouldn't freak out too much, but definitely up front on the offensive side. That's what stands out on film. If they can clean that stuff up, they're not out of it by any means. It's kind of like what we saw last year where a lot of their games are 1 or 2 possession games. So their defense is going to keep them in it. It's just a matter of, how can they react and how can they change things on offense to get some mojo going and find the end zone.
For sure. Well, speaking of solid,
you can't win a lot of games. You only have 1 touchdown in 2 games.
Yeah, it's tough. It's a tough way to try and get it done. That's for sure. Speaking of good defensive performances, let's talk about the game you were at broadcasting for IdahoSports.com, Sandpoint at Post Falls. And I think the Bulldogs said, hey, we've arrived to the rest of the state.
Yeah.
You and I knew how good Sandpoint is, but I think everybody else around the state finally saw it as the Bulldogs defeated Post Falls 35-7.
It was amazing to see was that I believe there was only 5 drives that didn't go 3 and out. That's a crazy stat. That when you can do that to a 5A team and a team that can put up some pretty gaudy numbers. On offense. Post Falls is able to light it up. If they get things rolling, that offense, the no huddle and how fast that they run, they can throw the ball 40 times in a game. One, it's going to extend the length of the game. And I think that's what we really saw Sandpoint do in the second half was they played defense with their offense and changed things up. But defensively, man, they are stout. I tell you what, their front seven is great, but what might be even better is that secondary is tough. Their safeties are as good as anyone. And I'll put them, I mean, with the likes of, I would say defensively, I mean, I'm excited for the game Friday night. I don't want to break it down too soon yet, but they are as good as anyone in 4A ranks in the state of Idaho. That defense is for real.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Ryan, that I vote in the media poll each week for the statewide media poll for football. I had Sandpoint number 2 in my poll this week, only behind Bishop Kelly, and that's just, you're splitting hairs at that point. But I'm really high on this Sandpoint team, and I told you that I think that they're my 4A title favorite right now in the state of Idaho. So,
everybody talks about, and Garrett Cox had a great game. I mean, he was our IdahoSports.com player of the game. But Parker Pettit is for real. That kid, and he's only a junior. He is legit. Yeah. I mean, and we haven't really seen them open the playbook passing-wise for him. I mean, it was the route concepts were fairly basic because I think they were trying to feel out what Post Falls kept adjusting to on defense between going from the man to zone concept. And you don't have to pass when you're able to get 8 yards a carry. I mean, you don't really need to spin it too much. And I tell you what, that inside zone read when Pettit keeps it, I mean, it's for real. Like, you watch that game on film and it is pretty awesome. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to say I'm not a man of few words, but really when I was watching that offensively, it was kind of hard to sit there and go like, how can you not kind of look at this team and go, wow. And that was week 1. I don't know what they're going to be like later in the year, but week 1, whew, that's a pretty outstanding debut.
Let me ask you real quick. What did you see from Post Falls? Like we said, they've got the offense that's capable of exploding, but to only be held to 7 points was eye-opening to me.
And I don't want to dog on kids at all, but the one thing that stood out was the amount of drops. That was what Craig and I noticed on offense. They dropped a ton of balls and wide open. I mean, like, we're talking 20 plus yard gains that were dropped, and they had 2 touchdowns that were dropped as well that ended up getting 0 points out of those drives. So, I mean, you look at that, it's a lot closer game than really the gameplay indicated. But you can't have drops like that and expect to win games. I mean, they were double digit in the drop category. You throw two interceptions. One of them was pretty costly because it did turn for 6 on the touchdown on the following play. So you got to look at that and take it with, some substance. But, they're a capable team. They're able to move the ball. The running back showed great flashes. The running game can be effective, and in the passing game, they got some deep threats. I mean, the kid that transferred from Meade and Spokane, he's the real deal. But, like I said, drops. I mean, we got to look at that. And if they can, really focus on that and clean it up. I know it's week 1. They're going to make some noise. I could see them as a playoff team pretty easily. I don't think that they showed their best right out of the gate. And there was a little bit of, I don't want to say discombobulation, but it really took them a solid quarter and a half to get things going. And then in the second half, they just didn't get opportunities to play offense.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this, when we look back at the end of the year, we might say Sandpoint was the toughest team they played as well. So, tough opener for Post Falls also. The final IEL team from District 1 that was in action was Coeur d'Alene. They played on Saturday at the Rocky Mountain Rumble in Madison High in Rexburg. It was a tough opener. We talked about Lehigh, 6A team from Utah, which is the largest classification there. And then the Pioneers almost shut out the Vikings. They won 33-7.
Yeah, and Lehigh, is legit. I mean, watch a little bit of that game on film, and that team is for real. I mean, if they were an Idaho school, I mean, they would be the favorite. I mean, you put them against anybody, and they would probably be the favorite week in and week out just based on what they brought to the table. Coeur d'Alene, and Coach Amos said it in the paper this week, was that, we're not going to freak out about this game, but we're certainly not going to pass the opportunity to learn from it. And I would expect to see things turn around for the Vikings. I wouldn't expect them to run from anything by any means. They've got the pedigree, they've got the coaching staff, and the kids are used to success. So that does mean something. But they've got a test this week. They can't, go from week 1 to this week and be looking down the schedule. I mean, the Sandpoint game does mean something for them. So it's going to be an interesting test for the Vikings to see how they kind of recoup from, I don't want to say getting taken to the woodshed, but it really wasn't a close game by any means.
Right. And that was Lehigh's 3rd game of the season. It was the first game for Coeur d'Alene. And so they had already
they looked way more polished. Let's just be honest. I mean, you could tell the difference on who was in week 1 and who was in week 3.
Yep, for sure. And Coeur d'Alene now with that loss has already matched their loss total from last year when they went 9-1. Big difference is that one loss came in the semifinals to Rocky Mountain. They came into that matchup 9-0. I think it's almost better to get a loss under your belt early. Whereas last year, Coeur d'Alene was undefeated going into the playoffs. And with each passing week, the pressure intensifies when you've got that undefeated mark, I think.
Well, and as like Ben Franklin says, things that hurt instruct. So it's good to get things out of the way that you can take your lumps and actually have something to work on the next week instead of going 48-0 and think you're winning, beating the world. So I really do expect, just knowing the way that Coach Amos coaches, he's not gonna let the kids forget what happened this last weekend, because there's going to be definitely something to work on, and they strive for perfection. Let's be honest, it really matters against the Idaho schools, but you want to have success every week. But it's a team that could really honestly go, 7-3 and still, battle for a state title. It really could happen that way. Just that's the way things work in the state of Idaho. So, I'm not going to freak out and hit the panic button and expect to put on the parachute to jump out of the plane yet. So
right. Yeah. Only week 1, that's for sure. Let's talk about some of those 3A schools in the Intermountain League. I think the big game we wanted to keep an eye on was Timberlake traveling all the way to St. Anthony to play South Fremont, a semifinal team from a year ago. And the Cougars looked a little more seasoned with the 27-12 win. But for Timberlake, I thought they hung tough and have a lot to feel good about from that game.
Yeah, and Timberlake, the thing about it is they, the type of offense that they run. If you run into another physical team that doesn't give you a lot of touches, you don't have the opportunity to score a lot of points. And South Fremont did a really good job of controlling the ball and not giving up a lot of turnovers. And that kept Timberlake away from the offensive side of the ball. I mean, they got their possessions, they got some touchdowns out of it, but it's also a type of offense that every week it gets a little bit better, and you can add your wrinkles as you go along. So, I mean, I still think Timberlake is a team to be really considered, in the grand picture. I don't know if they're a state title favorite by any stretch yet, but I still, seeing what they have and the skill positions that they've got, they're still a favorite in the IML. But the real team that I've got my eye on based on what happened on Saturday's Kellogg. So I don't know if you were going to bring up that game, but what they did to St. Mary's, a drubbing 32-0, is the Kellogg team legit? And the answer could be, I mean, we'll see what St. Mary's does in the next couple of weeks, but the answer could be, yeah. I mean, we talked about them with the running game that they had coming back and that type of offense that they run. They're going to be able to score some points. And, against the Loggers, they definitely didn't miss the end zone. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and we were surprised by that because we thought St. Mary's, the Lumberjacks had a chance to be a playoff team this year, and they still do. I mean, one loss doesn't cast that aside, but they were so impacted by COVID last year with their schedule. We were really excited to see how they came out, and yeah, you said it, a 32-0 shutout at the hands of Kellogg. We talked about Kellogg as a sleeper team. They bring back the IML Offensive Player of the Year, Ripley Luna, their junior quarterback, and he's got some good receivers to throw to as well. So they're kind of the opposite of Timberlake, where they'll throw it around.
Well, and he can run. I mean, yeah. He can spin it, but let's not forget he can run pretty well too. And that's I think the equalizer in all this is that, you can't just focus on one being one-dimensional. They're going to hurt you in multiple ways. And, so as things move on in the season, you maybe try to shut his running game down. Maybe we see him blow up and hit a couple 250-plus yard passing games. That wouldn't surprise me by any means. So, yeah, I mean, you look at them and then you've got like the contrast with Bonners Ferry. I mean, obviously losing 14-13 in their opener to a Montana school in Lincoln County. there's a learning curve in there too. And, I think keeping it close is a respectable score. I mean, the real test that we'll see what they do against Grangeville this week. That could be a great game. I mean, that's got the potential. Grangeville played Moscow tough. So what do the Bulldogs do against the Badgers in week 2? It would be kind of an interesting game to keep an eye on as well. And then obviously you finally get to see this week, Priest River is going to open against Medical Lake from Washington, which Medical Lake, if you know inland Northwest football, isn't the strongest program. So there's a bright spot there that maybe Priest River puts something together and throws the first victory on the board in 3 years. I mean, that would be awesome to see for them. And the Spartans, I know, have earned it. The kids that have stuck it out, they deserve a win more than anybody, but wins are never given, they're earned. So, you got to go out and actually put things together on Friday night, but they've got an opportunity in front of them with Medical Lake for sure.
Yeah. And that's, they're so young still. They've been young forever, it seems like, and they still have a bunch of underclassmen that they're relying on at Priest River. Just some quick background info on Lincoln County High School in Eureka, Montana. They're a Class B school in Montana, so Montana goes AA, A, B, C, and that would equal, so AA would be like 5A here, A would be like 4A, B would be like 3A. So that's an even match in terms of classification, but Lincoln County High School is the largest Class B school in the state of Montana. And Bonners Ferry, I'm pretty confident, is not anywhere near the top of the 3A leaderboard in enrollment. So that actually was a much larger school that Bonners Ferry was going up against, and to only lose by 1 is pretty impressive. So just a little background.
Yeah, and that's, like I said, the Badgers, they could have a great season. I mean, we kind of talked about that IML being a free-for-all with the top 3 teams. It's going to be who's throwing haymakers the last 3 or 4 weeks of the season is where it's really going to get interesting.
Yep, for sure. And then finally, let's talk about these 1A schools. I thought maybe collectively as a group, they had the best showing. You had just a wild game between Lakeside and Lewis County. The Knights end up winning 30-26 with a really late score. It was kind of a back and forth game.
Yeah, and they actually stopped Lewis County at the 6-yard line as time ran out. So, I mean, the defensive stand to close the game out. So, congratulations to the Knights. That was a big win on a Friday night. And we'll talk about in our helmet sticker portion of this, but on that game, because somebody had a huge game for the Knights in that one. But yeah, I mean, that was a huge win, picking up the victory against the, I believe it's the co-op between Highland and Nez Perce. The Lewis County team is. So, they're historically they get some athletes too. So a good win for Lakeside to start the year out. Wallace got a big victory. They beat Kootenai in kind of a back and forth battle, 46-42. So a good win for them. Clark Fork, beat the brakes off of Troy, Montana, 56-6. Yeah. So a huge win. I mean, I don't care what class you are, you win by 50, you're doing something right. And then, we got to see, let's see, I mean, I'm going through the scoreboard again. I mean, those are it for the small schools, because this week we finally get to see Mullen play Thompson Falls, and that game's going to be in St. Regis. So I know we're excited for that one, because the 3-headed monster for the Tigers getting loose is going to be fun to watch this year. I think that they've got a legit shot at winning a state championship too. So we've got some contenders up north, big schools and small schools. So I'm thinking that, it could be a decent year for District 1, especially at the small school range, because I want to see if I'm telling you, if Lakeside puts it together and keeps playing tough, they're going to be a tough out this year. They got some serious players.
Yeah, last year Yep. I was going to say last year, Lakeside had a lot of hype and kind of the same deal. People thought they were, and maybe they just weren't quite ready, maybe a year too early in terms of the state playoff level. They kind of had a pretty quick exit, but I agree. I think they're ready for a prolonged playoff run this year. It was a rough opening week for my home state of Montana in these cross-state matchups with Idaho. Troy got dominated. Lincoln County only won by 1. Anaconda lost to Salmon over on the eastern part of the state, and there will be a ton of Montana-Idaho matchups coming up this weekend, especially in the north. You talked about Thompson Falls playing Mullen St. Regis, and then Kellogg will play Corvallis, the Corvallis Blue Devils. They're about 10 miles from where I grew up in Montana. So I would love to see Kellogg just beat the pants off of them as well. So,
which could possibly happen. I mean, the way Kellogg's playing right now, I wouldn't put him out any week. That offensive showing is going to be a fun one to watch, and we think we've got him in a couple weeks too. So I'm excited to see them live in person.
Yeah, for sure. And then real quick, I just wanted to give a shout out to Kootenai as well. It's been a tough couple of years for the Warriors. Last year they only played, 3 or 4 games because of COVID. The year before that, they didn't have a team. So really, like you have to go all the way back to like 2018, the last time they had a full schedule of games. And they looked pretty good out of the gate with a new coach, Jake Pfeiffer. He was a member of the last team that got to the playoffs at Kootenai.
Yeah, I mean, they played well. It was respectable. I mean, back and forth game, and it was a 1-possession game. I mean, Wallace obviously winning 46-42, but you can come out after kind of a 2-year hiatus, come out and throw 42 on the board. That's a light years difference compared to where they were a few years ago, where they were struggling to get touchdowns. So, having an offensive showing like that, I mean, it can breathe some new blood into that program, and hopefully you can see them maybe pick up a victory or two this week. I know they've got a tough test this week. They're playing at Kendrick. So no favors done on a favorite. That Tigers team is for real. I mean, we saw them down in southern Idaho this last week, but Kendrick is a good program. And then we've got Lakeside playing at Deary, which should be a great game this week. Going back through the schedule, Lakeside, Washington is at St. Mary's. Shadle Park, a 3A school, now 2A in Washington, is playing at Timberlake. And then Medical Lake, like you said, is playing Priest River. Lakeland's going to be traveling down to Columbia, so it should be an interesting game down there. And the Road Warriors, man, the Lakeland Hawks putting in the miles this year already, having to go to Butte to play Preston, and now making the trip down to Nampa and play Columbia. Clark Fork, we actually got a 1A matchup now. Clark Fork is playing at Wallace, so one of those league games now taking place, which is going to be interesting to see. Obviously, there's the class difference, but the size difference between the programs, but should be a good game. And then, Thompson Falls playing at Mullen at St. Regis. Finally get to see Mullen in week 1 play for them. Kellogg at Corvallis. And then our game that we've got, Coeur d'Alene at Sandpoint, is the one that I am absolutely stoked about. So
yeah, let's dive into that one, because I'm not big on like hyperbole, but this could be the game of the year in District 1 and in the IEL, certainly.
Yeah, regardless of classification, I mean, you look at the two programs and how they do things. Sandpoint under Coach Knowles has really turned things, I think, turning a corner. They've always been really competitive, but it's a different team now. You look at this and they've got a different swagger to them, to where it's, they're a little bit more out in the front and open about, they know they're good. Let's put it that way. They're not brash as far as, I think, flaunting and taunting people, but they know that they're a successful team. They're going to have a successful year, but they back it up with their gameplay. And, I said it last week, and I would not surprise me one bit if Sandpoint wins this game. I'm going to be honest with you and just say right now, it wouldn't shock me if Sandpoint wins, just because they play so soundly on offense. And their defensive play, I mean, like I said, their front seven's legit, but the back end of that offense, I think, can compete with the athletes that Coeur d'Alene's got. What I think it comes down to is going to be the decision-making of Bankson, the quarterback for Coeur d'Alene. If he can limit turnovers, Coeur d'Alene's obviously, it's going to be a back-and-forth battle. I mean, we're going to look at it, and this game could either go 14-13 or it could be 52-49. I mean, let's not be honest about this. I see it's going to be one of those two results in that type of game, to where it's just going to be an offensive juggernaut where 50 to 40 yard gains every other play, or it's going to be two defensive stout units going back and forth.
So do you have a prediction on who you think will come out on top? Because I've got one, and we'll see.
Sandpoint wins. Okay, I'll give you the prediction. If Sandpoint wins, it's going to be like, Sandpoint's got a kicker, by the way, that's legit. So let's put that one up front too. If they win, I'm saying 27-20. If Sandpoint wins, They're gonna play stout on defense. They'll get a couple turnovers. They'll win. Not on a turnover. They get a turnover that will lead to the game-winning touchdown. Let's put it that way. If Coeur d'Alene wins, it's going to be like 42-20. I think Coeur d'Alene will flex. If they're going to win, they're going to flex muscle and they're going to pull away late, just because of numbers. Because Sandpoint does have a few guys in key positions that are playing two ways. To where I know the Vikings have a couple that do that too, but for the most part, they're one-way guys. Sandpoint did a great job. I mean, I'm kind of going back through Friday night's game. Sandpoint did a great job with substitutions and getting Garrett Cox breathers at the right time, and they didn't really miss a beat. I mean, Wes Benefield had a monster of a game very quietly. Like, he was so consistent and in on every play, but he didn't have like the gaudy numbers. To where like Garrett Cox, obviously we talked about him, where he had like close to 170 total yards and 5 TDs. But on defense, he had like 3 or 4 tackles for loss, a sack, and like he was almost, I think, double-digit tackles. So, I mean, as good of an offensive game he had a great defensive game too. So, if Coeur d'Alene can limit him, now I'm leaning Sandpoint in a close one.
Okay.
I'm going to go that route.
I'm gonna go the opposite way. I think you've got a couple of factors at work here. Coeur d'Alene's got more depth than Sandpoint. They've got a big, strong offensive line that I think will match up with that front seven pretty well. And I think Coeur d'Alene is going to be motivated, right? 0-1 start to the year. They're not used to being on the end of a 33-7 game. They're usually the team that's delivering that type of performance. So I think the coaching staff and the players are going to have a renewed focus and almost like poking the bear, right? You don't want to poke the bear. And I think the Vikings win by a couple of scores over Sandpoint, but that doesn't mean that I don't think Sandpoint is still a good team. It's just you're talking about a premier 5A program against a 4A program that just doesn't quite have the numbers. So I think I like Coeur d'Alene.
I'd say this to play devil's advocate because I'm rooting for Goliath or for David this week against the Goliath, but they're both Goliaths. Let's be honest. Like, it's kind of like 1A and 1B. So you just look at classification, though. Obviously, I'm rooting for the smaller class to knock off 5. It just makes for a great storyline. Let's be honest.
Right, exactly. So Ryan likes Sandpoint. I like Coeur d'Alene. All you fans out there, let's hear from you. We are launching this week our Gridiron Game Picks on IdahoSports.com. This is the weekly contest we run every week where fans pick every single game, not just in District 1, but throughout the entire state. Every single game that's going to be played this weekend, and whoever picks the most games correctly wins $25. So it's free to play, and you could walk away with $25, which is no slouch. So, and more importantly, it's your chance to prove that you, the fans, are smarter than the talking heads like me and Ryan, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's not saying much if you have a better outlook than I do, but whatever. So, for what we've talked about team-wise, I do want to give a shout out to a few individual performances from this last weekend, because we saw some great performances statewide, did we not?
Oh, fantastic. Too many to list here.
Yeah. So up in District 1, we had 3 that kind of stood out. I mean, and 2 of them, I think, kind of got a lot of mentions statewide. The first one we already talked about was Garrett Cox. He had close to 170 total yards, 5 TDs, and then the defensive game he had, amazing. He was our player of the game for IdahoSports.com. I want to give a shout out to our buddy Vander Brown at Lakeside Plummer. This is a gaudy stat line: 291 yards rushing on 21 carries and 5 touchdowns. Not to mention he had 2 huge stops on defense as well. So he's one of my players of the week. And then want to give a shout out to our man Carter McGann, wide receiver from Wallace, 107 yards receiving, 2 touchdowns, and then 78 yards rushing in their victory over Kootenai. So those 3 are my helmet sticker winners of the week, I guess we could call them. They had big weeks. Vander Brown, man, I got to do the 1A D1 basketball tournament for Idaho Sports. I got to watch that whole state tournament. Vander Brown may have been one of the most gritty players I saw in that entire tournament. I know that Lapway got a ton of like kudos and attaboys, but Vander Brown quietly had one of the best tournaments. And he's just one of those guys that puts his nose down and just grinds. And to see him get 291 yards rushing on 21, that doesn't surprise me at all, because that's just the type of kid he is. So shout out to him because, man, that's a whale of a ball game to have in week 1. So it'd be kind of exciting to see what he can follow up against Deary this week. Maybe he gets another 200-yard game, and it'd be kind of exciting to see what he has his season turn out to be.
Yeah, I was doing the math while you were talking there. That's almost 14 yards a carry for Vander Brown in that victory. So that's just nuts.
Yeah,
it's wild.
That's a crazy game. So congrats to them and their victory this week.
Yeah, that's wild. So we'll do this every week, Ryan. You've got 3 helmet stickers. This is a thing that happens in college football a lot, where if a guy makes a good play or he's an MVP of the week, he gets a pride sticker, a little helmet sticker that he puts on, and then by the time they're seniors, the whole helmet's covered in stickers. So
yeah,
yeah,
you smile at somebody, you get a helmet sticker. I mean,
yeah,
it starts to get it loses some of its flair, but yeah.
Right. So we'll hand out 3 of those every week. All right. You can go through and pick out athletes that you think merit that recognition. And I think that was a good way to start for sure. The 1A schools, I think, really did have the best overall weekend.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
yeah.
What's coming up this week on IdahoSports.com? Friday night, it's going to be Sandpoint against Coeur d'Alene. Ryan, you're going to have the call on that audio-only broadcast, 7 o'clock kickoff. And then also video broadcast this week on IdahoSports.com. The Post Falls Trojans make the long trip over to Rigby to take on the 5A runner-up from a year ago. They looked pretty good in their season opener, Rigby did. They're 1-0.
Yeah.
That game is going to kick off.
A rematch of an absolute barn burner last year too. So that was a great game last year to see, and I'm expecting much of the same this week. Hopefully we see this week. That would be a great game for the Trojans of Post Falls if they can put together a really tough one against Rigby.
Yep, that's for sure. Rigby won by 2 last year in a shootout, and it was a really good game. That game will kick off at 6 o'clock Pacific time, obviously, because they're 7 o'clock in Rigby. So 6 o'clock local time, and I'll be on the call for that one, Ryan, for IdahoSports.com.
Awesome.
I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a good game.
No, I'll have to catch the rebroadcast of that one after my game's over. But I do get the privilege of doing that Coeur d'Alene Sandpoint game from what's, in my opinion, the coolest stadium in the state of Idaho. Let's be honest. Like, Sandpoint's field right there on the lake is one of the coolest settings in high school football you get anywhere. So I'm pretty lucky to be there for that one, and it's going to be a whale of a ball game.
And they just got that new turf put in last year, and they kind of revamped the baseball and softball facilities as well. So yeah, it's going to be a great time. And don't forget to get those gridiron game picks in on the website, IdahoSports.com. That'll do it for this week's edition of the North Idaho Prepcast. Again, you can get the audio for this Prepcast on our website, IdahoSports.com, or wherever you download your podcasts. You can also get the video version of this on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel, as well as our Facebook page. All right, week 1 in the books. We'll have plenty to talk about again next week, and maybe we'll find out a little bit more about some of these IEL teams and where they actually stand. Should be a good week of football.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it.
All right, for Ryan Scaggs, I'm Brandon Baney. Thanks for tuning in to the North Idaho Prepcast on IdahoSports.com.